Hi, I'm Dr. Kersi Chavda. I'm a psychiatrist associated with the Hinduja National Hospital at Mahim. And I'm going to be speaking about one of the commonest psychiatric disorders that exists, and that is depression. We must remember that when we talk about depression, it's not sadness. So sometimes people talk about the fact that they're depressed because they've broken up, or they're depressed because they haven't been able to buy what they wanted to buy, but that is really not a psychiatric illness. When we talk of clinical depression, it refers to a number of signs and symptoms which have to persist over a certain amount of time and which have to cause problems related to normal social, occupational functioning, cause problems in relationships, and generally make life not such a happy place to be in. So when we're talking of depression, we must be aware of the fact now that there are actual changes that occur in the brain. The brain has a number of parts which do get affected. Mainly amongst them is an area called the frontal lobe. There's something in the thalamus, there's something in the amygdala. These are parts which are known to get affected. There are also theories related to neurotransmitters. There are theories related to electronic circuits in the brain which get affected. All of these are known to cause changes which make the brain of a depressed person very different from the brain of a person who is not depressed. Today there's also an explosion of genetics. So we are aware of the fact that if there is a genetic predisposition, which means that if somebody in the family, either on mom's side or on dad's side, has had some kind of psychiatric illness, especially if they've had things like anxiety or depression, then the chance that the progeny will have a similar kind or an allied kind of illness exponentially increases. You might have emotional issues where you feel a little down, you feel like crying, there are mood swings. There's often a feeling of dissatisfaction or disinterest and lethargy. So there is something in which I was fond of reading the papers, I was fond of going for movies, I was fond of going to the gym, and suddenly all of that stops. You feel that there is too much of sleep or too little sleep. There may be too much of an appetite or too little appetite. Sexuality often gets affected, the interest in that also reduces. Very often people who smoke or drink tend to smoke or drink more, or sometimes actually stop doing so because of the lack of interest related to that. There may be issues relating to withdrawal of socialization. Very often the person just remains stuck in his room, very often doesn't want to get out. There are problems even with getting into the activities of daily living. It sometimes just becomes a chore even to just go and brush your teeth or have a bath. Usually when we talk about these symptoms, we talk about them in terms of it should last for a period for at least 2 weeks, and it should last for most of the day, almost every day, and should be severe enough to affect one's normal social, occupational, relationship, work functioning. Very often depression also is associated with other illnesses. So anxiety and depression are almost comorbid, which means they're almost always found together. If a person is depressed, it's very rare that there is no evidence of anxiety. If a person is anxious, it's very rare that there is no allied depression. So each of them kind of feeds on each other, and very often the spectrum shifts. So, sometimes people wonder how a person who's very depressed at one time suddenly starts having manifestations of other illnesses, but that is a very well-known phenomenon. So it should not be surprising if you get out of one and have another kind of symptom complex. There's a specific condition which used to be called manic depressive psychosis or the bipolar disorder, which is associated with depression, which needs to be very, very carefully looked out for. Just like in depression, there is a lowering of everything, there is a decrease in what you want to do, there is a reduction in satisfaction, there is a reduction in motivation, there is a reduction in activity. If you have very mild depression, it might be okay for you to undergo therapy, and normally something called cognitive behavior therapy is fairly effective. But for those who have moderate or severe depression, it is imperative to seek the help of a psychiatrist and to be put on medication. There are a number of myths related to medication, which are myths. They do not make you a zombie, they do not make you get under the control of somebody, you are not become a changed person, you have not become a different person. All it does is it gets the depressive episodes under control so that you start feeling more positive. You have to be on medication for a period of time, which is under the supervision of a qualified psychiatrist. And then the possibility of your having a depressive episode in the future will start to reduce. Sometimes a combination of medication with psychotherapy works more effectively, but by and large, it is unlikely that only therapy itself would work if the person is moderately or severely depressed. A combination of psychotherapy with medication is what is indicated.